Okay, welcome. They sell these at Walgreens now
Yeah.
for $1. They're kind of cool. I put one on yesterday and scared the hell out of my cats.
I should wear that to work.
Here.
So you can get it at Walgreens?
Yeah,
For
$1 at
$1?
Walgreens. It saves needy kids all over the world. They tell me.
I'll put it on when they have, because they've got me doing something
Yeah.
very foolish right now, so I'll put it on.
Oh, well then here.
No, I'll get one of my own.
Oh, okay. Well then throw it back. Well, that's slick. Anyway, we're here to talk about flattening the world, grasping the real nature of thought. You know, we all think. We've been thinking for years and years. We were born, and as soon as we got born, we were told to think and how thinking's a good idea. And the more you think, the smarter you are. The smarter you are, the more you're going to get, in the world, the further ahead you're going to get. That thinking is a great thing, and do it as often as possible. Right. You ever seen a manic depressive go to a mental institution, listen to a political speech? These people are thinking all the time.
Uh-oh.
So, thinking is often not a good idea because thinking distorts the way we see things, the way we talk about things. For instance, this sounds like a totally unrelated subject, but it's all mixed in there. What is ego? What is the self? The self and ego is essentially how we think of ourselves. That's all ego is how we think about ourselves, our self-image, our self-agenda. This is all termed ego. And in Buddhism, the main driving force is to be liberated from the self. Free ourselves from ourselves so we can be ourselves, essentially. So it's freedom from the tyranny of ego. It works like in meditation, you suddenly find yourself very, very embarrassed by the fact that you've been thinking all your life and you never knew what a thought was. A thought is a sensation, a mental sensation. That's what it is. It arises just like any other sensation, and then we become conscious of it. In 1980, there was a really interesting experiment where they hooked all these people up to encephalographs, and they were trying to figure out the problem of free will. And so they said that people should do this, just flick their arms like that, so their wrist would bend. And the encephalograph would measure when the brain got ready to move the arm, to move the wrist. And then they figured out, well, they'll have a clock that goes by, and when it gets to a number, that's when the person will decide to move their wrist. And they would tell them after the experiment what the number was. Well, as it turns out, the brain was ready to move the wrist 100 milliseconds before the person had the thought of moving their wrist. In other words, the brain reacts to any choice we're going to make before we make it, before we even know we're going to make it. If I decide to do this, my brain was ready to do that before I decided I was going to do that. Interesting. So for a while, materialistic neuropsychologists thought that, okay, our actions are predetermined and there is no free will because we're not going to do anything until the brain tells us to do anything. Then we decide to do that thing that the brain has told us that we're going to do. Today they're not so sure. Today they're starting to think that the brain or the mind, which makes the decision, does not exist in the brain. It exists elsewhere than the human body. So your mind is not actually in your body. Your mind makes the decision, the brain receives that transmission, gets ready, and then you become conscious of it.
Your mind is not in the body or the head?
That's what some people are starting to conclude, neuroscientists. And there's a huge convention about this a couple of years ago in India, sponsored by the Dalai Lama, on scientific research on neuropsychology, how we physically think. And we didn't have to go through all that. It appears that we already knew how that worked. Monks, I will teach you the all. Listen and pay close attention, and I will speak. Now, I know you've all heard this sutta before because I use it a lot. The Blessed One said, what is the all? Simply eye and forms, ear and sound, nose, aromas, tongue and flavors, body and tactile sensation, intellect and ideas. This is called the all. Anyone who would repudiate all and try to describe another, if questioned exactly on what might be the grounds for his statement, would be unable to explain, and furthermore would be put to grief. Why? Because it is beyond his knowledge.
Can you repeat the last two sentences?
Sure. Anyone who would say, repudiating this all, I will describe another, if questioned on what exactly might be the grounds for this statement, would be unable to explain, and furthermore would be put to grief. Why? Because it is beyond his knowledge. That's from the Samyutta Nikaya 3523.
So he's saying you can't explain it?
There's nothing else. You can't point to something else. This is everything. There's nothing beyond it. What we experience is we experience because we perceive it. Not only do we perceive it, we abstract it. We don't experience the whole enchilada. What we experience is what we have picked and chosen to experience through our consciousness.
Mui, is that from the Buddha or a sutra?
Yeah, it's from the Buddha.
Directly from him?
Directly from the Buddha. From the Samyutta Nikaya, which is one of the oldest of the Buddhist books from Pali Canon.
Mm-hmm.
So when the Buddha is talking about mind, he's talking about the sensation of thinking. Thinking is only a sensation. And if we go to the wheel of life, because the Buddha didn't care where the mind lies. That was the Abhidhamma's thing. That came a little bit later. The Abhidhamma said essentially that there is one entity in the universe, and we sort of rise out of that entity. Sort of like the Terminator coming out of the lava flow or something. And what the Buddha was more interested in was how it is we experience our stuff. The nature of thoughts is illusory. When I say that, a lot of people say, well, you're saying thoughts don't exist. They're not real. Of course they're real. They're as real as your car, as the butts you're sitting on, as the cushions that the butts are on. It's real. But the definition of an illusion is something that appears to be what it is not. And when we think about our experiences, we're recreating them. And this is where we had trouble today at the Jung Center, is that people are so used to thinking and taking their thoughts literally as gospel truth that they're totally unaware that they're only beliefs. They're just beliefs. I believe in gravity. But when I think about gravity, a lot of other stuff comes up. Like how much I weigh, what I look like when I weigh that much, how much you weigh, what a person that weighs what you weigh looks like, what you must be eating. Is that healthy? Is it nutritious? And the thoughts go on and on and on and on and on, and suddenly I'm not thinking about gravity anymore, I'm thinking about you. These are called papanchas. Proliferation of thought. One thought leads to 10 more. Each one of those 10 lead to 10 others. Eventually you have a bazillion thoughts going on in your head. You can stop these bazillion thoughts in two ways. One, strict meditation, and two, chanting. That's why in Pure Land, it's Namo Amituo, that is constantly repeated to stop that thinking process and see things as they really are. We take things for granted because we've always thought about things in a certain way. When we see, anybody ever see a three-dimensional drawing? You know, like a cube drawn on paper? When we look at it, there's the illusion of a cube. But it's only an illusion, and most of us can figure that out. That it's just a drawing representing a cube. At the same time, we habitually would say, that's a cube. It's not a cube. It's black lines on paper. It's not a cube. It's not even a drawing of a cube. Our mind is organizing that picture to look like something. When you look at the altar, your mind is organizing that altar to look like something. You're not seeing what it is. Because some people, when they look at the candle, they go, oh, light, wisdom. They look at the Buddha image, ah, peace, serenity. They look at Kuan Yin, oh, compassion. None of this stuff is that. All of this stuff is simply symbolic. We think in language. Language is only symbolic. A symbol is by definition what it does not represent. When you think of your mother, well, you don't have to think, you can just look. So, but when the rest of us think about our mothers, we're thinking about a symbol of our mother. We're not looking at our mother. There's a really great story. I told you this one last Monday. Picasso was on a train. You all know who Picasso was? Great artist, cubist, abstractionist. Anyway, he was on a train and some guy on the train recognized him and said, oh, you're Picasso. And Picasso said, yeah, I'm Picasso, yeah. And he said, you're the great artist. I don't like your stuff. And then Picasso said, why not? Everybody should love my stuff. Why don't you like my stuff? And he says, because it's not realistic. What do you mean by not realistic? He says, well, it doesn't look like it's supposed to look. It doesn't look like what it is. Well, what is realistic to you? So the guy reaches in his wallet, pulls out a 2-inch by 2-inch photograph of his wife. And he says, see, this is real. This is what she looks like. You should paint more like this. And Picasso said, well, can I see that? And he picks it up and said, this is your wife, huh? The guy said, yeah, that's my wife. He looks at her and said, she's very small. Turns it around and says, and she's thin, too. That gives back the picture. Now, this sounds absurd, right? The guy knew that was not his wife. He knew that that was a representation of his wife. It would be like if you said you were hungry and I showed you a Kentucky Fried Chicken ad, and suddenly your hunger goes away because you saw a picture of the chicken. You go, oh, I'm full now, I can go on my way. You go out backpacking in the woods. Do you carry along with you a stack of photographs of chicken? No, you carry food. But on a greater extent, a much more serious extent, when we think about things, we project in exactly the same way. We're saying that which we perceive is real. And we ignore the experience entirely. So just like that image of a cube that you can flatten out and say, okay, that's just lines on paper. It's not really a cube. It's just lines of paper. What if you look at a mosquito? When you look at a mosquito, depending upon your relationship to a mosquito, you recreate the mosquito to be something else. Anybody here afraid of spiders? 1, 2,
I like spiders.
3.
I like them.
Oh, you do?
I like
Yeah.
spiders.
Well, most people's feeling is if it has more than 4 legs and less than 2, they don't want to deal with it. Snakes and spiders, forget it.
I like them. I don't like roaches.
I think that you don't like roaches. Okay. We don't like roaches because we associate things to the roaches. We impute meaning to the roaches. What we're imputing to these things we don't like, just like we're imputing to things we do like, are attributes they really don't have.
Disgusting.
Disgusting. Which brings Donald Trump to mind.
Bruce Rauner.
Bruce Rauner to mind. Anybody else from the Republican Party? They're supporting Donald Trump now. Last week they hated him. This week they're supporting him. Go figure. We attribute qualities to other people based upon our likes and dislikes, our attachments and aversions. Good and evil is it. There's nothing good, there's nothing evil. If we like it, it's good. If we don't like it, it's evil. There's no rule that says this is good, this is evil. We make that judgment. We place value on things. Without value, without applying meaning to things, there is no suffering. No existential suffering whatsoever until we apply value and meaning to things. That's when the suffering comes in, the dukkha. In teaching this in a meditation workshop like today, and we'll be doing this later on this afternoon, we'll be meditating and examining things as they truly are. We examine well, let's go back to the statue. That's always good. When we examine the statue, we give attributes to it. You may have nothing going on with the Buddha, but you might have something going on with wood. You might have something going on with the lines in the image. There might be some mental projection because of the way the light reflects off of it, that it's on an altar. There might be all kinds of mental projections on it. But when you clear your mind of the projections, all that's there is a piece of wood with lines on it, reflected light, and that's all you're really experiencing. You're putting it together in a particular way to create a particular illusion that gratifies or satisfies your self-agenda, your ego. Because that's really what our lives are about, is self-agenda. Reinforcing, defending, nurturing an ego, which is nothing more than a concept. Because in the final analysis, all ego is a concept that I have about myself. If I'm depressed, it's because of the way I conceive of myself. If I'm happy, it's because of the way I conceive of myself. Now, there's stuff I'm going to attribute the happiness to. I had a piece of chocolate earlier today that was to die for. Oh, I was so happy for at least, 30 seconds. I was the cat's banana, monkey's pajamas. That's something. And then the chocolate was gone, and I noticed there wasn't another piece. My world was shattered. What was I going to do now? I had a cup of tea. My wife was mad at me because I ate the last piece of chocolate and didn't offer it to her. I said, well, would you have taken it? She said, no, it's the last piece. I said, then what's the problem? Yeah, she didn't like that response because it was not compassionate as far as she understands compassion. In Buddhism, these preconceptions cause us a lot of problems. For instance, let's talk about compassion. When we talk about compassion, we're really saying feeling sorry for somebody or being empathetic towards somebody. Ain't what it means. The height of compassion is not prejudging someone else, not projecting onto them our garbage. My wife wants to move to Sweden because she's afraid Donald Trump might get elected president.
So you have an out if it happens.
I got my passport renewed. Canada's close. But what good is moving to Sweden or Canada or Great Britain or Taiwan or someplace if I carry my baggage with me? Because there's going to be another Donald Trump somewhere else, just with an accent. There's, in the nature of thought, this illusory nature of thought, we create these views because we're basically insecure. This is, in the wheel of life in the center, there are three animals: the pig, the rooster, and the snake. Sometimes the pig is imagined as a monkey because of the monkey mind. But normally it's a pig. Now that little cute piggy represents confusion. We go through life being constantly confused. The ego is composed of a pig, a snake, and a chicken. Confusion, attachment, and ignorance, and aversion. This is what our ego is composed of. And what are we confused about? We're confused about, why am I doing everything right and everything's going wrong? We're confused about the nature of reality. We're confused about and befuddled and bewildered by why other people do things. Like I used to work at a place, and every day I went in there confused as to why this place was still in business and how they could possibly afford to pay me the exorbitant amount of money I wanted. That was confusing to me. How did that manifest? My job performance kept getting worse and worse and worse because I was confused by that issue. That confusion blended into everything else. I became averse to my boss because I saw him as a complete incompetent. How did that manifest? Well, an incompetent would only hire other incompetents, right? So I started seeing everybody as incompetent. This was my aversion. But on the other hand, I had an attachment to a self-view, which elevated me on a pedestal. So I was above all these other people. They were incompetent. I was not. He made a mistake when he hired me because I'm that damn good. This is the pig. This is the rooster. This is the snake. The snake is symbolized in the center there as part of our ego because it's venomous, and that venom spreads to every facet of our thinking. You cannot have a thought without these three critters in there. This is why in Buddhist practice, thinking is allowed, but very restricted. That's why we meditate, that's why we chant, is so we don't get overwhelmed by the papanchas, that proliferation of thought which take us away from reality. So what is reality? Reality is seeing things as they are, without the augmentation of thinking. We live in an augmented reality. We're constantly enhancing what's there. And we're creating stuff out of nothing, ex nihilo. I used to say that in the Catholic Church all the time. God created everything ex nihilo, out of nothing. We do the same thing, constantly. Let's look at some of the things we create. We create the people we're with. We create the people we love. We create the people we don't love. The people we love don't really exist, not in reality, because we've augmented them. We've taken that individual and put a facade around them. We put a mask on them because we like that mask better than what's really there. People we don't like, we do the same thing, except the mask is somebody else. When we really flatten these illusions and see what's really there, we become astonished. So in Buddhism, when we talk about liberation, we're really talking about liberation from our ego. That's nirvana, to be free of these preconceptions, of these illusory thoughts. You'll still have them, but you'll know they're illusion and you don't have to take them seriously. So think about some stuff. During meditation today, we'll think about the bell or the statue, something innocuous. Then take it a step further. Think about somebody you know. Flatten them out, see what's really there. Not what you think is there. Get rid of that stuff and just look at that person as they are. Maybe a cat, maybe a neighbor. Take another one, think about God. Flatten that out. What's really there? Then think about yourself. Not how you see yourself, but how you really are, without the preconceptions and projections. What is a thought? No matter what thought you have, you can deconstruct it and see it for what it really is. A mental sensation without substance. It's real when it happens. It's not real when it's past. It is a symbol of what you think is going on. When we talk about the sun, anybody here ever seen the sun? And you're not blind? Nobody's seen the sun. We see indications of the sun. For a second, I want you just to look into your own eyes.
Now?
Right now, look into your own eyes. Can't be done. Look into your mind. Can't be done. What can be done is we see indications of the sun. We know that we have eyes because we can see stuff. And we know we have a mind because we can think. And that thinking tells us what our mind is doing, or what the mind is doing. Let's not take possession of something we have no rights to. Because when I began talking about this, I said the mind may exist outside the body. In Chinese Buddhism, that is the belief that there is one mind. And we are, as aggregates, manifesting out of that mind constantly. And when the physical form dies, it goes back into the mind to reemerge somewhere else. And here's another interesting concept about ego. Did you realize that when the Buddha talks about the self, the egoic self, he speaks of it in identically the same terms as he talks about karma? So when we say we are heirs to our karma, founded upon our karma, we are our karma, we're talking about our ego. What is it that a Buddhist really wants to do? Create no new karmas. Create no new egos. No new minds. But simply experience things as they are in the moment. And this is ultimate truth. We talk big doo-doo about, doo-doo is what 5-year-old kid says when you're talking about bullshit. We talk a lot about ultimate and conventional realities. Like there's a big difference between the two. Here's a secret. When we talk about conventional reality, we're talking about communication. Our conventional reality is what we have convened and agreed upon calling stuff. So when I talk about that thing that we would commonly call a Norfolk pine, that tree there, we have agreed that that is a green tree with needles on it. But we might as well call it, we could just as easily call it a Beshugana Salraspitz. And if we all agreed that's what it was going to be called, a Beshugana Salraspitz, that's what it would be. And that's conventional reality. If we strip away the names, the colors, and just see it for what it is, it's a lot more pleasing. Because then it doesn't have to fit a standard of treedom. The green doesn't have to fit a standard of greendom. You gonna say something? Good. Don't interrupt me, man. Okay. The ego causes us to create a matrix and a metric at the same time. It wants us to interface with stuff, and that stuff has to meet our standards. The ego also says that everything that is inside the skin bag is me. Everything outside the skin bag is not me. It creates an artificial separation. If we sit in meditation, we realize there is no me, there is no stuff, there's just experience. That's when we sit in meditation, we do that. If anybody in here is meditating to relax and be comfy and just space out, you're wasting your time right now. Meditation is about seeing reality as it is. That's why it's called Vipassana now, insight. That's why it's called Zen, absorption, because you're absorbing reality. And you have to be awake, alert, and energized to do that. If that's not what you're doing, then you're not meditating. You're spacing out. And why not? You're probably spending 99% of your day spaced out anyway, creating this artificial reality in which we live. So, but then on the other hand, when we create a lot of not selves, like, I know I'm not my car. You know you're not your car. But tomorrow morning, if you went out and looked at your car and you found out a tree had fallen upon it, you take that pretty personally. Oh my God, a tree has fallen upon my car. It is smashed. What am I going to do? Oh, I'll call the insurance company. Those dirty crooks, they're not going to pay me what it's worth anyway. I don't even know why I pay insurance. You've already created something there. You're identifying with your car. I know if a tree fell on my car, my wife would be out there petting the car. Oh, poor baby. She'd be trying to ease its suffering. We take that personally. We take our jobs personally, my job. But it's not inside our skin bag. It's outside of our skin bag. So we live in this very confused world of everything outside of me is not me, and yet everything I identify with is outside of me. That's cognitive dissonance. I used to be called a neuroses. I don't even know they still use that word. Do they still use the word? Okay. Since everybody's neurotic, I didn't think there was anything special about it anymore. Everybody has a neuroses of some kind. Just like everybody has an addiction of some kind. And one of our biggest addictions is the addiction to our views. The views we create because our ego needs to be supported. So when at the end it comes down to, when we look at thoughts, when we look at how we create ourselves, we have to make a decision. Am I going to declare allegiance to reality or my ego? Most people declare allegiance to their ego because they're afraid if they give up their ego, they'll disappear. People have been giving up their egos for thousands of years and they haven't disappeared. Dalai Lama has an ego, but it's not terribly inflated. He still looks about the same size that he did 20 years ago. He hasn't changed much, even though his ego's gotten less and less and less and less. We don't disappear. We just don't become slaves to it anymore. We see it for what it is. This is why, again, in Pure Land Buddhism, they had the idea of self-power and other power. Self-power is this ego trying to plow its way through life. Other power is deathless. It's aware. If we let the other power take over, our ego steps out of the way and life becomes a lot simpler. Because we're not constantly beating ourselves up for stuff we didn't do that we should have done. We're also not praising ourselves for stuff that we should have done and did do. We demand rewards for things that we're supposed to do anyway. We don't exist in the heaven realm anymore. We're only happy when we're gratified. We don't exist in the animal realm where we're afraid of what other people are going to do to us. And there's not a whole lot to be afraid of, even in our society. Not really. What are the chances of you walking out of here and getting shot? Really? What are the statistical chances of you jumping on the red line and getting mugged? Really? Unless you're like asking for it. Please mug me. Here's my iPhone. Take it, please. The hungry ghost realm. If the ego wasn't there, we wouldn't be craving, we wouldn't have these addictions. The hell realm, if the ego wasn't there, we wouldn't suffer from our basic pissed offness. We wouldn't be in hell. And if we didn't have an ego, we would not figure we were entitled, and we can start bullying other people, and we exist in the Titan realm, the realm of the Azuras. which is an interesting realm because in that realm we take our weakness and make it our strength. Anybody here ever have a needy boyfriend or girlfriend? Needy child or cat? It's really cute at the beginning. Oh, I need you so much. Love me, take care of me. I love you. Oh, please. Yeah, after about 20 minutes, it gets real annoying. You know, go get a life. Well, that's a form of bullying. I'm going to bully you into doing what I want you to do. Take care of me. Because I don't want to take care of myself. The other aspect, of course, is aggression. You will respect me. Well, respect's a two-way street. And that's where we find ourselves in the human realm. The Buddhist practice is the practice of becoming fully enlightened. The practice of seeing things as they actually are consistently. This gives us liberation from our existential suffering, which is caused by our ego. And as soon as we do that, we discover something wonderful, that we have become authentic human beings, full, self-actualized human beings. And this is the whole point of Buddhist practice. But the first thing we have to do is start seeing through the illusory nature of thought and stop projecting our fears and aversions, our cravings and attachments, and our basic ignorance onto the outside world. Get rid of the confusion and see things for the way they are. Any questions? No questions. You're all enlightened beings.
Confused.
You're confused? What are you confused about?
How do you get away from your ego? I mean, where do you start? It would take me a lifetime at this rate.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
You do it. You practice it your whole lifetime because it's an evolutionary process.
Mm.
It doesn't happen overnight. The first thing you do is you discover a method. You grab our little mala, and we either stop and take a deep breath on each mala or each bead, or we learn how to chant something like Namo Amituofo, or Om Mani Padme Hum, or green and purple wooden doorknobs. It all works. And we stop our mind from wandering. We find something to concentrate upon, to really focus our mind. So we take our myopia, our myopic vision of what it is our ego wants, and we place it on something else, like the breath. That stops the thought process. You're still going to have thoughts, but they're not going to lead to more thoughts. So you've slowed that way down. And then you can see clearly what it is that your ego is constructing for you. Because you're not going to be able to deconstruct your own ego. You have to deconstruct the stuff that it does, so you can see evidence of it. The other thing you can do is you take your notebook, any notebook, a diary. I've got a sketchbook that with about that thick paper, nice thick paper on it. Had a nice design on the cover, that's why I got it. I must have been feeling like a sissy that day. Anyway, I started writing, this is 10, 15 years ago. And every day I wrote down at least 50 thoughts that I was having. Judgments mainly. They were judgment. That's good, that's bad, that's pretty, that's not pretty. Ooh, she's hot. Ooh, she's not. And I would go through, and it was two columns. One was the thought, And what I was imagining I was seeing, and the other column was what it was I was actually seeing, without the nonsense that I was imputing to it. And I kept that up for about 6 months. And by the end of the 6th month, my list kept getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter until it was like maybe 1 or 2 a day. And I lived that way great. And that wasn't even in the monastery. That was like in downtown San Francisco. So it works very, very well. But then you have to continually maintain that level of mindfulness. And so it becomes a habit. Once it becomes a habit, the ego just gives up, goes away. But it'll fight you at first. It'll show up every 20 minutes or so.
It can be very scary to just flatten the thought and see it for what it really is, especially if you're so hung up on certain thoughts or belief. It's a very scary process.
It is horribly scary, yeah.
Strip out all
Yeah.
the exterior and just, it's very, very hard.
Oh, people that are involved with in any kind of religious view have the hardest part with that, because they see their version of God in everything. And it doesn't have to be a spiritualized religion. It can be a political thing or an economic belief or some sort of philosophy that has become their religion.
Right.
Because one of the definitions of religion is dogma. And dogma is exactly what you're trying to get rid of. So anytime we have a dogma, we have a religion. And dogmas only work when they're corporate. So you have a lot of people believing the same dogma. That's where you have a religion. And we don't teach religion anymore. We teach dogma, and particularly we teach the dogma of rationalism, where all thoughts have to be linear. They have to, A has to necessarily lead to B, necessarily leads to C, and there can't be any paradoxes or contradictions. What's wrong with contradiction? What's wrong with paradox? We live in a paradox. We know that things exist because of the way we think of them. We also know at the same time that things don't exist the way we think of them. That's a paradox. We would say they either do or they don't, because we're Westerners. We like things black and white. And reality is not black and white. It's like a whole rainbow of colors. It's all true. True on some level.
What about, you said that when you can't just try to get rid of thinking, because that's like, or second guessing, or anything. If you try to get rid of it, it's just going to make it worse.
It makes it worse, yeah. So you just allow it to be, you just don't take it seriously.
So if my car has a tree fall on it, and I get really upset, and then I have another thought that gets upset because I got upset. Oh, I'm not enlightened, I'm not whatever. So then, did I let that one be too? I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you let that one be too. Because they're all illusory. They're all symbols of something else going on. Okay. It's me, and the tree falls on my car. And I go out there and I get really, really upset. I sink into a hellscape because I'm really basically pissed off that a tree fell on my car. Basically. Okay. The feeling arises, I go, wow, I'm kind of pissed off. There's the feeling of anger. There's the feeling of injustice. There's the feeling of anger toward that tree, of anger toward Mother Nature for creating a tree that would have the audacity to fall on my car.
There's the fear of not being able to get a replacement.
Fear arises and all this. And I'm watching all this stuff arising. And at the same time, there's physical sensation. I'm seeing my beautiful red Volkswagen crushed into a hunk of uncomfortable metal. because I'll never be able to sit in the front seat again. There's a tree in there. That makes it uncomfortable. I'm seeing this. I'm feeling anxiety. I'm feeling butterflies in my stomach, and I'm watching all this stuff happen. Well, while I'm watching this stuff happening, the anger and of the car being crushed by the tree goes away, because I'm watching this stuff happening.
But then it comes back.
If I let it, yeah.
But most people are, it's gonna come back.
99.9% of the people won't even watch what they're thinking. 99.9% of all people.
99.9, that's a lot. I've done that process, but then it comes back.
It comes back when you allow it to come back. Because then you're allowing the punches to come back again. You have stopped seeing it for what it is and went back to the illusion.
And then sometimes it gets to the point where it's so powerful that it can't, it's like almost feels like I'm powerless and nothing I can do about it.
Where you go and find a big rock or a brick, and you hold it in front of you, and you put one foot out, aim very carefully, and drop it on your toes. I guarantee you will not be thinking about your car anymore. Then you'll think, why was I so stupid to listen to Sensei Mui's advice?
You know what, that's actually probably one of the main theories for why people cut themselves, or, self-inflict harm to stop their inner, turmoil of their negative thinking, and get the intensity of the pain just takes it all away.
Oh yeah,
Refocuses.
I agree with that. Yeah. Also, why some people eat. If some people cut themselves to get away from the turmoil of their thoughts, the racing of the thoughts. Other people overeat to get away from it. I hurt so badly, I need a reward. Now they're focused on the reward instead of the thoughts. I totally believe that. Other people see that as diversion, digression, something you do with, I can never remember the word I want. Distraction, that's the word I'm looking for. Distract themselves from the pain of their own thinking. So if I'm in great pain because of a tree fell in the yard, one way of distracting myself from that would be like kicking the neighbor's dog. Because now, I have power, and I can think about the power I have now over this animal with the big teeth and everything. And it's really a Chihuahua, but I'm going to say he's a rabid Labrador Retriever or something. I'm going to create another illusion that satisfies my need to feel good about myself and reestablish that self-image I have.
So what's the skillful way of dealing with a tree falling on the car?
You look out there and, well, look, damn tree just fell on my car. I'd better call the insurance company and report it to the police so there's a record of it and get this taken care of.
Okay, so you don't have all this stuff going on.
No, you just do what needs to be. There's a really cool saying in Zen.
That's the whole point of not thinking, right?
That's the whole point of not thinking, exactly. You want to do something, and what you want to do is what needs to be done when it needs to be done. Because if I'm standing there ranting and raving, being really upset about this damn tree on my car, and projecting how am I going to get to work tomorrow, blah, 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 how am I going to get this fixed, am I going to need to get another car, or can this be fixed, and all these other thoughts, I could be calling the insurance agent and letting him worry about it because he's getting paid for it. I can get the car fixed. Oh, by the way, my insurance also has a loaner policy in there, so I got another car. And I'm also a member of AAA, so I can get a loaner car that way too. So, it's all taken care of. And then I can look on the bright side. That car was getting old anyway. I can get a new car. Maybe one in a color I like.
So it doesn't mean that you have to have nothing. So deconstructing ego doesn't mean you have to have nothing.
No.
It just means if you're thinking more clearly, you can think you'll have more options available.
The clearer you think, the more options you have available. Absolutely true.
So those healthier realizations will come to mind.
Yeah, it's like this.
Instead of disaster, we all like. Does the ego kind of think that we're like project doom and disaster?
It projects doom and disaster. It also projects fantasies of happiness, sugar plum fairies,
which is bad because it's unrealistic.
Justin
and it's
Timberlake or whatever his name is.
Which is bad because it's unrealistic and it's going to inevitably lead to disappointment because it's impossible to
Anytime you place faith in and declare that you're going to be happy through some conditioned thing, and everything's conditioned or else it wouldn't be a thing, then you're asking for disappointment. You're asking for ultimately dissatisfaction.
So that's the fantasy that's harmful, and then there's the doom.
Mm-hmm. And
so if we're seeing clearly, we get rid of those.
You get rid of both of them at one time. And that makes it possible to create the better delusion, as they would say in Pure Land Buddhism.
Which is okay.
Sure, it's okay. You have no choice. You're going to create a delusion anyway. You might as well create one that works for you.
So you're going to have thoughts anyways, but you're just going to like pay attention to the ones that are more enjoyable.
You pay attention to the ones that are more useful to a healthier self agenda. We have the possibilities here of having a damaged, wounded ego or a healthy ego. Now, a healthy ego is infinitely preferable to a damaged, dysfunctional one. And both of them are equally illusory. Both of them.
Mm-hmm.
The damaged, wounded ego is something you really want to get rid of. So we try to create a healthy sense of self. This would be the healthy ego, the healthy sense of self. So we know exactly what it is with clarity of what it is that is non-existent. Now that sounds crazy and counterintuitive.
Say that again.
You want to create a healthy sense of self that you can see clearly, because you can't see a wounded ego very clearly. You're going to have all this other stuff around it, all these projections and things around it. So you want a healthy ego that you can go look there and say, this is what I am. Wow, that's sharp. Now I can get rid of it. I can let it go. You don't get rid of it.
You can't get rid of the damaged one.
No, because you can't see it. All you're seeing are symptoms.
Oh yeah, you said earlier we can't deconstruct the ego. We can deconstruct certain aspects.
The fantasies
because it's too
around
much
it.
to do the whole thing. So you do one aspect at a time.
Well, you can't see it. You as you cannot see the ego, because at the time that you as you are looking at the ego, it's like the eyeball trying to see itself.
Okay.
In meditation, you see the ego clearly because you separated yourself from it. The ego is now out here.
So
you're not part of it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm using the
so
you
you're like
word
going
generically.
You're going outside your body so now I can see my eyes.
Yes. It's like looking in a mirror.
Okay. And then, so the thing where you say we see a healthy version of ourselves so we can let it go?
You can let it go. Now letting
that's
go
only
is
possible. That's only possible if you get rid of the greed, anger, three poisons.
Yeah, if you diminish their effects.
You can't have a healthy ego without getting rid of those three.
You're going to have those three every time you have an ego. They're going to be there. It's like ignorance. You will never get rid of ignorance entirely. Ignorance in the sense that it's blindness, that you're not seeing what's obviously in front of you. Go back to this thing. We call it a bell. We have agreed to call this a bell. And this is the clangor. Clang. My cat would say, have agreed that this is a water bowl and this is a chew toy.
Right.
Whose reality is better? Neither. They're just different perspectives of reality. So when we have a wounded, damaged ego, we're seeing reality in a much different way. If we can clean up the ego, have a better sense of self, a stronger sense of self, very healthy, altruistic, beneficial to ourselves and others, we can see it more clearly, then we can let it go. Letting go is not getting rid of. It's not holding on to. Allowing it to change, or naturally, holistically, rather than trying to keep it cramped into a little cage.
So you don't try to, if you're trying to get rid of it, you're trying to control it.
Yeah, if you're trying to get rid of it, you're really doing, you're engaged in a very futile effort.
Okay.
So what you have to do is create something that is much stronger, much more beneficial, much more effective, much more skillful. So that's one of the reasons why morality plays such a big part in Buddhism, is to get in the habit of acting out skillfully. And that's what we're trying to do with the ego, is create something that's a lot more skillful than the ego we've got now. Because the ego we've got now, whenever we started on the spiritual journey, we probably had a very, very damaged ego. Very wounded. So we've been binding up the wounds a little bit at a time and letting it grow into something else, something that is much more pleasing, much more beneficial, much more skillful. The Buddha was very interesting on this question, because some people would say, there's no self. Definitely not a self, don't even worry about it. Other people say, of course there's a self. We have to look at the context and content of each one of these teachings. In some parts he's saying, ultimately no, there is not a self. The self is a transitory, very changeable, nebulous thing that comes and goes. It is not set in concrete. He's talking about a soul. There is no soul. Don't worry about it. In the other talks where he's saying, yes, of course there's a self. Well, look at yourself. What do you see when you look in the mirror? Who's sitting in this room but a collection of selves? Transitory, ever-evolving entities that are interacting. These are selves. But ultimately, the self you think you are is not the self that exists. You exist the way you think you exist by virtue of thinking that way. But in reality, you don't exist that way. You think of you exist some other fashion that you're not seeing.
So in meditation, you look at yourself without thinking?
You're
analyzing it without the thinking?
That's why it's called just looking. Just observing, not interacting with it. And this is very tough, because we're so convinced that we are a concrete, solid entity that for some people it's virtually impossible to let go of that. And they don't see the fluidity of our existence. We're constantly molding ourselves into somebody new.
So if you're, since we're kind of conditioned to think more linear, can you look at it like we've had this really solid self, so as we get better, as we go forward with the practice, we try to soften it more and more, so that the softer it gets, the more it's movement.
Right, right. The early Christian church used the term humility a lot, meaning exactly that same concept. Humility, in its original form, was a word that meant moist, humid, humility, from the same word. It means moist, the ability to take another form. Humility would get you from the egoic world to the spiritual world. Back in the early days in the church, when spirituality was their driving force.
And that way you can be like water and adapt to anything.
Like water adapt to anything, yeah, as Bruce Lee said. So yeah, that is exactly what we're talking about. If you don't believe, if you can suddenly stop believing that the self is this rigid form, then it can manifest as anything. You can make yourself into anybody you want to be. As soon as you stop believing, you're set in stone. That's the other problem with our society, is that we look at somebody's past and we say, oh, that's who they are. That past is gone. That person dead. Even if it was yesterday, that person's gone. That past is not who you are. Who you are right now, that's who you are. Who you will be tomorrow is someone different than who you are today. And you have the choice, by molding your karma into something beautiful or something disgusting. You have that choice. You have the choice to be depressed or happy. You have the choice, like, I was at this talk, oh God, what was that, Thursday night or something? A guy was talking about giving himself permission to be an artist. He was unable to give himself permission to be an artist, even though that was the love of his life. There was something in his ego that stopped him from manifesting as he wanted to manifest. There was something in his ego that created a being that he was totally unhappy with, until he made that decision. And his exact words were, so I could do what I've always wanted to do. All I could think of is, you lying snake. You've been doing what you wanted to do your whole life long.
He just wanted to do stuff that wasn't beneficial to himself.
He just didn't want to take that risk of becoming an artist. He wanted to go into science. He wanted to study technology. He wanted to have a family and kids. Now, at 33, he was blaming his wife, his family, and his career on his unhappiness because he wasn't an artist. He wanted to do that too. He had made all these choices. And then he gave himself permission to be happy by becoming an artist. And of course, everybody, oh, that's a wonderful story. Oh. And the 2 or 3 Buddhists in the back of the room are going, oh, what a crocker. Guy's lying to us and himself at the same time. And the next person came up about creativity and talked about creativity, and she was bouncy and happy and flirty and all that, and she was kind of cute, and using 20-year-old pictures that she claimed were her own, and attributing stuff to Maslow that Maslow never said. You know that being self-actualized is synonymous with being creative. Well, you're creative every damn day of your life. You don't have to take a class at Hack Studio. Oh, excuse me, I wasn't supposed to say the name. You don't have to take a class to become creative. We're incredibly creative. Look at the world you've created. I mean, God, you created Donald Trump. You created the Holy Roman Church. You created all this stuff in your world. You're incredibly, extraordinarily creative. That's why we have trouble seeing things as they are, because we're too damn creative. Create something beautiful. That's our choice. Let's take a break.